Hi there. I'm really wondering more strongly every day why things are arranged so pathetically awful. And of course I know the answer. It's the fact that we have been building up all our capacity on an oil system, an oil-based carbon system. And the people that were selling the oil didn't want to stop selling it. So they didn't like to make it available to create solutions that would abolish the use of oil. They would like to be, let's say, a supplier of it all the time, and that brought about our carbon credit system that we are now basically locked into. And it's really surprising how people behave in that system. Um to be very, let's say, strict and or very short about it, there's a culture of competitive suffering around the world. People are competitively suffering. And if they're not suffering in real terms, like they're basically builders and they're basically being wasted away, doing the stuff that machines can't do yet, then or being churned like Filipinos in Dubai on these projects, or the Indians, the lower caste Indians that are imported there and live like animals, or in any other region, Chinese workers that can be found in basements in New York. All these people are being abused. People like that, they are really suffering, and they're not doing it voluntarily. They're not crazy. But there's lots of people that are voluntarily suffering, that are voluntarily making life as difficult as possible, that basically are not so much in love and interested in solutions. They're interested in presenting a solution, which is a different thing. They're interested in owning a solution, which very quickly requires it to be very complex, because otherwise other people can guess it. You know, if you fall into the water and somebody calls to you swim, and you swim, that's not very difficult to do. But if you fall into the water and somebody says, no, don't do anything, this is a very dangerous situation, you could drown, which is true. But now you have to, let's get the book, and oh, I'm an expert, you have to pay me a lot of money, and I can tell you what to do, and I'll just, let's say, like a pilot, I'll talk you in to the shore. I'll make it really complex, which it doesn't have to be. Well, there's two people suffering there. There's one, the person that is actually in the water and getting cold, and there's somebody on shore that is basically going through a number of, let's say, mental hoops in order to maintain the illusion of his necessity. And as a reward of that illusion, he will get something, because he'll be respected, and of course he will get gifts, and he'll be praised, and he'll be socially more superior and all that stuff, because he rescued the guy that fell into the water. And you know, if that guy had swam, if the guy had moved his arms, he would probably be dead right now. But he didn't. So it's about, but that's a weird process if you think about it. And a lot of the economical theories that we have at the moment have to be of that nature, because they are created to protect a group of people that have a lifestyle which is maintained by basically taking the margins of the whole process of the economy, which is not a bad thing. You know, if there's so much oil being burned and being used to produce goods and services and stuff like that, and everybody's enjoying that, and what's the hurt in, what's the crime in taking 10% of that, for instance, which is a historical normal percentage that you can take as a ruler. You are expected as a ruler then to provide security, which these days is a different story. But anyway, but it does something to the people, I think, and that's more like a theory. It's not a theory of mine. I'm not convinced of it, but you can logically derive that there is an interest and a reward for people that are convoluting matters, that are smart, able to create a story that is convoluted, which can then be used to obfuscate anything that you want to obfuscate. So basically, I find out that I can use carbon nitrate as a solar panel, which is a very, very durable material. It's very hard, and it's actually true. It's a photovoltaic material you can create. It's black, so it absorbs a lot of light. Carbon is black. It has a very wide bandwidth, so probably produces a usable voltage at a much broader spectrum than normal solar panels. It's as simple as making it and then grinding it and then putting it as paste on the panel. That's true. You can find that in literature. Then it produces 6% of electricity, or 4, something about that range. But it's absolutely free. Nitrogen is in the air, carbon is everywhere. It's one of the most abundant elements. The process of making it means you have to heat it, but of course, you know, you can do that eventually with the electricity from the same panel. So you would have a perpetual solar panel machine. I'm not sure. There's probably some complications there. If such a thing gets known, and of course this gets known in about 96 or I think earlier, it's simply a search for usable materials for solar panels with a high band gap, or let's say a wide band gap, broad range, and that you basically can make a semiconductor out of it. But now you're not following me anymore probably, so forget about that. But it's a whole search, and there's many materials that are usable. As soon as you find one that is really usable, you start researching it, because you know you have to be very precise, and the efficiency has to be maximal. That's bullshit. That's complexifying it. That's basically locking it up in complexity. So that you can talk about it every year that you achieved something new. We have 1.5% more yield from our Gratzel cells, which are a very old type of organic solar cells, and there's a new version which is basically use inorganic or stuff that has never been alive, never been part of organisms, to be much more powerful. 3 types of paints which are sensitive to different parts of the wave, the spectrum. So together they make a lot of electricity, and you can make solar panels out of that. It's just described in a paper as a Chinese guy that researched that, and you can do it. You can do it. You can make a thin film solar panel of 3 colors of industrial paint, which you can get everywhere, and it will have a yield of about, I guess, 9% or something was the number, maybe more. You'll say 9%, that's bullshit, it's not enough. Well, it's more than nothing, and you have to compare it to your cost. What are you putting into the system for what you get out of it, you know? So, you know, if the thing is very cheap, if it's very easy to make, and if you can make like fields of it for next to nothing, then of course it doesn't give a damn how much the yield is, as long as you basically you have enough roof space. You know, it's not like there's a shortage of roof space for solar panels. So do it, but that's not done, and I can trace that. But that's an example of keeping wandering and keeping the thing complex and presenting it to the public, and the public is really oblivious of that. But there's lots of other situations in which it's very easy to basically switch off people's intentions and motivation towards a certain goal by simply dividing the motivation. That's I guess, if you want to boil it down, that's the principle. So I say I want to go to the beach, and then somebody says to me, well, do you want to go with the tram or with the car, or with the bus, or with the bicycle? That's complexity there, right there, introduced as basically with a subliminal challenge to you to optimize. I guess you know, that's where I'll end up in this video. So basically, what you have is people that are controlling you by making you divide your motivation, by challenging you to optimize. Because, and that's a very important aspect of it, because they present themselves as superior, so you have to meet their challenge. You know, it is like a guy with a gun pointed at your head and says, you know, I have a riddle for you, and then you comply. You try to solve the riddle because he has a gun. He's superior in power. Or you don't want to look stupid, so that's a social punishment. So somebody looks really smart, and then he says, well, now I have a, you know, I say, well, our modern economy is not generative. It's not growing at all. It's wasting. It's burning fuel. How can it be growing if it's burning stuff all the time? That's a negative. You know, you start with a warehouse of gasoline and a few machines, and at the end of the afternoon you have a few products and no gasoline anymore. That's not growth. That's not improvement. That's not a yield. You lost the whole warehouse of gasoline. Where the fuck are you going to replace that by? It's impossible. That's the problem with it. So we need a generative economy, so that in the morning you begin with a warehouse of stuff, and at the end of the afternoon you have 2 warehouses of stuff. That's generative. Then you get more. And then the guy goes, well, of course, you know, it's quite obvious that you don't understand economics. I don't agree with economics. But the people that do that are in the world to complexificate our understanding of everything in order to basically divide our motivation, so that we are not able to develop a new action, so, or basically to make sure that the road towards our goal seems to be winding and difficult, and and the goal seems further away, impossible to achieve. And the mind, there's one principle in the human mind, is that we always do what is the easiest. That's fundamentally the whole principle of our brain. We do the easiest thing we can imagine. And of course, if you help me to imagine something that is possible to be very difficult, then I'll no longer try to do it as soon as I agree with that, as soon as I go along with that. But the people that do that, they must be, let's say, willing to suffer, to basically to tie their own brains into a complexity and a knot, and basically make up stories all day. And they must be willing to do that. They must be willing to constantly lie and convolute and not check and not be. It's like what's that guy? A neo-conservative that was Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld. So from there's known unknowns and unknown knowns and known. He worked at an office together with Wolfowitz in the 70s, and he made up the whole Cold War basically. He said, well, the Russians have secret weapons, and they said, okay, show us the secret weapons. They said, no, well, we can't. They're secret. So that type of personality, and he got really rich. He was, of course, and what it's, so to come back to my story, and I'm gonna do it one time tonight because I don't have much time, but there were a few elements in it. First of all, you have a personality. You have a goal. You want to achieve something. Somebody else tells you that you have to make choices in order to achieve that goal, and you accept that challenge because that person radiates more ability than you perceive yourself to have. So you basically accept that. That's typical hubris effect. So if you have hubris, you can present complexity. You can present choices to people. The hubris, basically the cocky behavior, makes that the aggression or the assertiveness of people is reduced. In meeting that assertiveness, that aggression, that's a psychological effect. You can see that in the brain. But anyway, that's a long time ago. I looked into that. And that makes you try to look for other routes, and the routes are provided at the same time. So instead of going through the front door, which might be dangerous because, recently we had, long story, which you cannot really check, so there's a part in that you suddenly start accepting, well, there's this problem with doors recently, that the paint is very, very poisonous or something, these Chinese doors, and you never know who, whatever. There's a guy in the neighborhood that puts grease on them, that's toxic. So, but you can go to the window or behind the back, or you can basically take this, buy this hammer of me, this sledgehammer, and make a hole in the wall. You better do that, because I did that with the other 5 neighbors as well. And they're still alive. You don't know whether you'll be alive if you try to enter through the front door. That type of bullshit. That's what our world is completely saturated by. And why? Because the economical system that we had didn't care what people were doing, because it was pushing oil and getting the margins. I have to think a little bit more about this, because I think it's pretty funny actually. If you think, and I think the useful point in talking about this is that you should realize that there's many goals that are very easy to achieve, but they are now hidden under piles of complexity and even very weak resistance, which is another strategy, is that you you basically say, somebody says, but you know, we don't need oil, we can use, and there might be some other source, like ammonia for instance, burns like hell, it's good, very good in your car, it's overabundant because it's a waste product of agriculture. We can use ammonia, and then, you know, responding in a way that is not even resisting it, makes it very weak as a thought, as something that you, and then you might give up as well. If you talk about ammonia as a fuel, which I like to do because I think it's a fantastic idea, because you can make it using electricity, so you can have windmills making ammonia, and then you use ammonia in your car, and it actually has more power in your car than any other gas, and it's more safe than any other gas or fuel. If you try to use that, you run into the fact that there's a whole economy based on the disposal of ammonia, and it's horrendous because ammonia is a very potent greenhouse gas, and it's evaporating from all these ponds with manure. And if you would like to, then you can separate it using some kind of plastic membrane that the Germans developed. And you can put it over your pond, or you can put it somewhere near the pond that you can, let's say, have airflow, and then it separates. Ammonia separates from the air. Ammonia NH3, you put it through a cracker. I'm not sure what the word is, but you separate the H2, the hydrogen of it, and you put it through a fuel cell. It's still 50% efficient, so you get a lot of electricity, or you get a lot of heat to heat your stables. And you don't get the potent greenhouse effect. And if you use it in your fuel cell, you make nitrogen and water with it, then it's no longer any greenhouse effect, gas. None. No one. But that's not done, because there's an economy based on first of all, making ammonia out of natural gas, selling it to the farmers, and then taking the manure, which is partially ammonia, of course unused ammonia, you could almost say, or recreated ammonia by these bacteria in the stomachs of the cows and the pigs, and driving it all across the country, and eventually just dumping it in the meadow where it starts poisoning the groundwater. You know, this is just a very old, I just have this whole can of examples like that. That system is protected by the same type of lies, which are communicated primarily by people that are able to project hubris and assertiveness and intimidate somebody slightly, so that somebody will accept the fact that there's a complexity in doing something about this. And I thought that was my topic today, but it's not a very structured video, this one. I'll try to make one outside, but it has to be daylight. Hopefully this weekend I'm going to build a solar air heater together with 2 other people, and that's going to be fantastic. It's freezing here in Holland. It's it's going to be more than 20 degrees below zero, I believe, this weekend, but it's a clear sky and there's a lot of sun. Fantastic ice. I hope it doesn't snow, and then you can go skating as well. But I'll make some footage of that, and that will be interesting because, of course, solar air heaters provide heat, energy, which you need. And another system that I built in the summer is a solar cooker, which with vacuum tubes, which if you put it outside in this weather, it will actually be able to make a nice cooked satay. And I'm gonna try that as well. So, and hopefully that all works out, because I have to, of course, arrange that. But if I do, I'll post some footage of it, and it might be interesting. Thanks for listening.